Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the series where I talk about stuff. If you are new, my name is David, and what I do on this channel is talk about movies, books, and video games. These are not my limit, and I will also talk about other things in future videos, but in this video, I want to talk about the Hunger Games trilogy. Before I start, though, these videos can be played in the background while you're doing something, or you can just sit back, watch the Red Dead footage as you listen to me, but I would recommend the first option. That being said, let's get into the video. Now, I'll only be talking about the Hunger Games books, not the movies. Mostly because I like the books better, but I'll also mention a few changes I liked that the movies added. I'm currently watching the movies as I write this, and I prefer the books. I read the trilogy last year and began to have Hunger Games fatigue while on the third one, so I haven't read any of the prequels. I will make a video on the fourth book, but this video will only cover the main trilogy. So, let's just get into it. Now with the Hunger Games, it might just be the best book in the series. It's not my favorite, but I can call it a masterpiece. It definitely has a few flaws that are more personal gripes than anything, but for the most part, the first one is the best. This pretty much was the foundation for the teenage dystopia genre, and you can tell why. The world building in this book is pretty good, but I prefer the other parts of the story. But staying on topic, the world is pretty engaging. The concept of the Hunger Games is pretty freaking cool. Getting 24 people to fight to the death in an arena while surviving against other things like the environment or creatures created in the lab, all that is pretty cool. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but still, it's pretty cool. But something I expect from my stories with set pieces like this is strong character writing. In my own writing style, from my own works and from the works of others, is when the plot is driven by the characters. And that's probably why I like this book so much, because the characters in this are great. I'm going to probably have some hot takes in the video involving some of the characters, but those will come in later when we get to the second and third books. Let me start by saying the side characters are all great, for the most part. I think Peeta and Gale are each good, for their own reasons. They're both the nice guys that the main character has to choose from. I'm not really much of a romance guy, and if I like romance, it's because it adds impact to the story. So does the love triangle affect the rest of the plot? Yeah, but I mean, I prefer the other elements of the story, like the action, the survival, and all the other characters. But going back to the side characters, Hamish is probably my favorite character in the entire series. I think he might just be because Woody Harrelson played the character so well in the movies, but I like him before I saw them, so maybe not. This guy was Katniss's trainer, and yet I liked him more as a character than Katniss herself. Now let's talk about some of the other characters, which I think are either fine or just mid. Most of the Capital guys, the talk show host guy, Katniss's stylists, they're okay. I just don't really care for them as much as the others. And also the Effie character, one of my least favorites in the series. I get she's the only person who buys into whatever the Capital is doing, but at the same time, she's just so annoying. The other tributes in the arena, same thing. The ones that contribute anything to the plot, like Thursh, the two District 1 and 2 tributes, whose names I can't really remember, I think was I can't even remember. And another character I'll talk about after, all of them were pretty good. Katniss's family, they were fine, but I'll come back to them in a bit. And Senna, yeah, he was fine. I don't really care for him as much as the fans probably do, but I don't hate him. I like him more than if I was indifferent to him. Now we gotta talk about Katniss herself. Katniss, as the main character, needs to go through something what writers call character development. And does Katniss go through any? Yeah, because she wouldn't be the main character otherwise, you dumbass. Anyways, I'm gonna go into spoilers now. But these books have been out for a decade, so if you haven't read them yet and you don't want to get spoiled, then stop watching. But again, you clicked on this video, so that's on you if you get spoiled. There are 3 moments in the story where Katniss has any serious development. The first, when she volunteers to take her sister's place in the Hunger Games. The second, when one of her fellow tributes, Rue, dies. And then at the end of the book, when she's willing to kill herself and Peeta with the poison berries if they can't win the Hunger Games. These are all pivotal moments for the character of Katniss. They completely change her character. But the most impactful is when Rue dies, when Katniss realizes she needs to win the Hunger Games for Rue. Rue is kind of like what Katniss sees as her sister, even though Katniss has an actual sister. She projects her actual sister into Rue, which I thought was pretty interesting. Despite her limited screen time, Rue plays a big role into the story. And it's one of the most memorable moments of character development I ever read, and one of the reasons why Katniss is such a good character. The only problem I really have with her is that she's really annoying. This isn't a problem as it is in this book than with the other ones, so I'm only going to cover it when we get to the third book. But with these points, I'm going to have to give The Hunger Games 10 out of 10. Catching Fire is probably my favorite book in this series. It definitely has a small drop in quality compared to the first book, but not by much. The plot picks up right after the first one. The world is on the brink of war, and this leads Katniss to participate in a second Hunger Games, this time fighting against the other winners of the previous games. There's a lot of tension throughout this book. The build-up around the next Hunger Games, and the tension surrounding the rumors of war, everything was so well done. The new arena was pretty cool, but I prefer everything that comes before that. Once we got into the arena, it just feels like the first book on fast forward. That really isn't a problem since both halves of the story are balanced. Now let's talk about the villain. In order for Katniss' story to continue, we need to give her a villain to fight, and President Snow fits this role perfectly. The few scenes he has are great, and you can feel his presence throughout the entire story whenever something happens to Katniss. He goes out of his way to ruin Katniss' life just because of how much he wants to control everybody. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the movies too much, but they added some scenes of Snow talking to people, and they added a lot to the character, since it would be impossible for us to get scenes like this in the book, since it's only told from Katniss' point of view. I know we later got a whole book on Snow's backstory, but at the time of recording this, I still haven't read it. I'll probably do a dedicated video on that fourth book after reading it, but for now I'm only covering the scenes from the movies and the book. The returning characters were great, Haymitch continues to be the GOAT, but the real highlight were the new characters. This is where I'm going to have some hot takes when it comes to the previous winners of the Hunger Games. I think the best characters introduced were BT and Joanna. BT was the brains of the games, and Joanna is just an interesting character. Since we're getting more books in this universe, I honestly wouldn't mind getting one covering the backstories of BT or Joanna. We're only given a little bit of their backstories in this book, so there's a lot of room to work with. The other characters, Mags, the District 1 and 2 tributes, and the others, they were either good or just fine. This next one might get the fanboys and girls mad, but I never cared for Finnick. He was a good character, and he had his moment in the third book, but I honestly don't see why everyone likes him. He's alright, just not amazing. Something else I wanted to mention is the party scene early on in the book. In this scene, Katniss goes to a party to celebrate winning the Hunger Games. Here she finds out that there's a drink that people take to vomit after eating as much as they can, just so they can eat more. This scene sets the stage for the entire rest of the book and the series as a whole, explains why the Capitol needs to fall, because they are just stuffing their faces as much as they can, while the rest of the people are starving and throwing up just so they could eat more, which is probably one of the most important scenes in the series and one of my favorites. And so I just have to give this book 9 out of 10. Mockingjay. If you read all three of these books back to back, you know that there's a clear drop in quality in Mockingjay when compared to the previous two. As the third book in a trilogy, Mockingjay needs to wrap up things in the story. That's kind of the point of the third book in a trilogy, and they usually have a lot to wrap up, the plot points and the character arcs. But at this point in the trilogy, there's not usually need to expand the story further because we have enough world building. And usually, the third book or movie is my favorite in the series. But Mockingjay suffers from wanting to expand the world of the Hunger Games while also wanting to expand on the world and add new characters and enemies for Katniss to fight. And it's kind of what makes the book fall flat for me. During this book, we learn about District 13, we learn what they do and how they plan to fight against the Capitol. This is necessary world building because we barely know anything about them. But then you have the District 2 subplot, the PETA brainwashing subplot, the Finnick gets married and gets killed for shock value subplot. Some of these I like, but they would probably work a bit better if the book was longer, and we had more time to dedicate to this. We get 2 chapters on the District 2 subplot, and it's thrown away right after that. This is probably why the filmmakers split the book into 2 movies, but that doesn't really help the book in question. This is also where Katniss starts going from slightly annoying to incredibly annoying. She spends half of the narration complaining about everything and the other half describing what's going on. And I get that. I probably would be complaining if I was in her situation too, but nobody around her seems to be doing that. They seem to be doing just fine, just carrying out a war and watching everyone die around them. But no, she's just complaining like everybody. and I get it. You want your main character to be likable, and if you want them to be, you have to make them likable. I will say on a more positive note that I do like some of the plot beats. Katniss choosing not to kill Snow in the end, Finnick's whole reveal mid-book, and the ending. The book does its job of ending the story, but also tries to expand the world too much. I might be treating it a bit harshly, but then again, I had Hunger Games fatigue while I read this, so 6 out of 10. But you can't give it a 6 out of 10. You just said you had Hunger Games fatigue. Fine, 6.5 out of 10. Anyways, that's how I'm going to end this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe if you want, or like content like this, and tell me how I'm wrong in the comments below. Anyways, until next time, goodbye for now, and I'll see you next time when we talk about Stephen King.
Bitch, I must have. Well, let me have a roll and a song on the board. I'll cut it.